Hi everyone, welcome to the third episode in our Teaching Business for People and Planet series. This is we invite leading academics from across the fields of business management to discuss the challenges and rewards of teaching the next generation of students while instilling a greater sense of purpose and care for people and the planet, as well as prosperity and peace. My name's Kimberly and I'm the Senior Marketing Manager for Business and Management Textbooks at Sage. I'm here today with publisher Matt Waters, one of our authors, Professor Mark Peterson. Today they're going to be discussing sustainable marketing and the wider societal and environmental impact that this can have. Towards the end of the episode, we've left time for a live session, so please post any questions in the Q&A box that you would like Mark to answer, and he'll respond to as many as he can in the time we have allotted today. Please note that the chat box is going to be disabled for this webinar. This session is being recorded, and a recording of the webinar will be available on the Sage YouTube channel afterwards, and also emailed to everyone who registered the webinar. And now I'm going to hand over to Matt to start the interview.
Hi everyone, I'm delighted to introduce Professor Mark Peterson from the University of Wyoming. Mark and I first met around 2016, I think, when Mark was just made the editor of the Journal of Macro Marketing, which is published by Sage. And I became Mark's book editor at Sage a few years later, ahead of the new second edition of his textbook, Sustainable Marketing, A Holistic Approach. So it's great to be here with Mark today, talking about sustainable marketing, and of course, a little bit about the book too. So thank you, Mark, for joining us. And let's start and kick things off by asking you, given how much the term is used, how you would define sustainable marketing and what it means to you both in scholarship and practice. And how do you define it to your students in particular, given that this is a webinar that focuses on teaching? What I find interesting is that the book refers to a holistic approach, which extends beyond just the environment to include wider society and governance too. So we often think mainly of the environmental factors when we're talking about sustainable marketing. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about your perspective and your definition of the term.
Sure. Thank you, Matt. It's great to be here today. Sustainability, definition for that I like is integrating environment and social issues into business decision-making. So integrating environment and social issues in business decision-making. So when that broader lens is taken by business decision-makers, it actually puts them in the role of being, I guess, more adept at strategic decisions. So thinking and looking long-term, and so what might influence their companies, their firms, such as changing consumer taste, technology, even globalization moves, pandemics, these kind of factors that are external to the firm really come in and matter to senior leaders. There's also a dimension of intergenerational justice. So making these decisions, so basically our generation is not ripping off future generations and their ability to live lives of high quality. And so those would be the focus. Interestingly, in recent years, Larry Fink, who is the CEO of BlackRock, which is the largest investment management firm on Wall Street. So this is the most titanic figure on Wall Street. His firm and he are endorsing sustainable business practices. And a couple of years ago, Larry sent a letter to all the firms in which they invest, and he invests more than $8 trillion in firms. And he told them that if BlackRock did not perceive that these firms were about sustainability, that BlackRock would disinvest from them. So this is a profound move. And so just in the last 10 years, we've gone from perhaps being on the side, waving our arms about sustainable business practices, to having the biggest firm on Wall Street guide their firms in which they invest to pursue sustainable business practices and be serious about them. So that's pretty exciting.
And as I mentioned, we first met when you were the editor of the of macro marketing. So I'm interested to hear what you think the relationship is between macro marketing and sustainable marketing, and what you feel sustainable marketing can maybe learn from macro marketing. It feels as though the mainstream is now much more interested in ideas that macro marketers have been discussing for decades now. So what do you think?
That is true. Macro marketing is on the interplay between marketing and society. So how marketing practices influence society, how society influences marketing. So you can just look at the example of the iPhone and our smartphone and how that introduction of one product has changed culture. So we're connected now, and we literally can communicate in nanoseconds around the world about what concerns us, or even sending video about what we're experiencing. So that is the way that marketing changes society. Society influences marketing many times through actions of the government as a regulatory body. The original macro marketers came together in 1976 in Colorado for a seminar, and it was, I think these scholars were sensing that marketing scholars were not addressing important issues, particularly related to externalities. So if firms were allowed to just conduct the business as they had been doing, that the natural environment would be spoiled. Water would be polluted, air would be filled with particulate matter, babies would be born with deformities just resulting from these. It was not going to play out well for society. So they began this scholarly pursuit of macro marketing. Over the decades, the journal has been around for more than 40 years. These scholars at leading institutions all over the world have really come to about 6 subdomains of macro marketing. The first is quality of life studies. Then ethics, so the ethics of marketing and marketing issues, the natural environment, the systems approach. So macro marketing would take a systems approach and trying to understand the big picture of things. History, marketing history, so the longitudinal approach of how we arrived at where we are now. And then finally, poor countries or developing countries. So what is happening there in terms of firms and the development of these societies. So there's an acronym, that Queenship, which is relevant to those in the UK, and it really represents this quality of life, ethics, environment, systems, history, and then poor countries. So the Queenship acronym applies there. I was at a doctoral consortium for the American Marketing Association in 2016, and there one of the leading strategy scholars presented. Her name is Raji Srinivasan, and she's at University of Texas at Austin. She presented about marketing strategies future, and she talked about healthcare as being important to important issue for strategy researchers. Also, income inequality, privacy issues, natural environment, collaborative sharing economies, and then finally emerging markets. And so when I thought about those and arranged them accordingly, they mapped on directly to the Queenship dimensions that have formed over the 4 decades for macro marketing. So what she was saying basically is the future of marketing strategy research is macro marketing. And so we've had scholars like Phil Kotler at Northwestern. He's been writing about capitalism. Bob Lush, who's deceased now, but his service dominant logic with Steve Vargo is very much about taking a wider view and looking at the ensemble of players that actually come into contributing to how a dyad, a buyer and seller actually do things. And I think that's an exciting future direction for marketing scholarship. Russ Belk at York University in Canada, he's written about consumption and this ethnographic approach to understanding phenomena related to consumption. And in the CCT movement, they've been trying to understand the context of consumer identity projects. So where do people find meaning? And so it is in the context, and it's in these realms that macro marketing has been investigating in the past. The context of markets is very important to marketing practitioners. They call it business acumen. So knowing what might influence business in the future is very important to CEOs. So really macro marketing issues are very germane to business practitioners. And there are companies like Novo Nordisk based in Denmark. They focus on insulin treatments. They have really embraced sustainable business practices. They have things like global reporting, where they have one report. So it's not just financial statements they give every year, but they give a statement on how they're doing on natural environment issues, water consumption, energy consumption, also social issues, their own employees, retention, training for them, also special programs for people afflicted with diabetes, how those programs are doing, and I guess how they're impacting patients over years. And so there's more accountability. Not surprisingly, people on Wall Street like that a lot because it allows them to understand how well these firms are run, and the assessments of risk are more accurately gauged by these Wall Street analysts.
We should mention that CCT stands for Consumer Culture Theory. We have a lot of acronyms in business schools, so it's important to be clearer sometimes. Which
is really anthropology brought into marketing research.
Yeah. One of the aspects of the book that I really did enjoy are the examples and the studies, and the way that you do such a great job of bringing the theory and the research to life for readers. So what are some recent kind of shining light examples of sustainable marketing that you think stand out and are worth sharing with colleagues on the call and students more generally?
Sure. Well, Hall of Fame sustainability firms, one of them would be Patagonia, the outdoor garment company. They're based in Ventura, California. And from the beginning of this firm, which was about 40 years ago, Yvon Chouinard, the founder, he and his wife wanted a firm where employees could, pivot and take care of sick family members if they needed to. And also they have a surfing culture there and an outdoor culture in Ventura, California. It's on the coast. It's probably about an hour or 90 minutes north of Los Angeles. And if the surf was up, you could go out to the beach and do surfing and then finish your work at night or whenever it was done later that day. So that kind of flexibility started. Yvon Chouinard identified that early on that the purpose of business would be to benefit the natural environment. And so that's what he has done. He was really kind of a teacher for his employees, meeting them in small groups, telling them the importance of what they're doing here. And they learned sometimes in some painful ways in terms of avoiding debt, in terms of also pursuing organic sourcing of cotton so that their garments would not be laced with formaldehyde that would then sicken the employees or the actual customer. So there's some things like that they've done along the way that have proved to be very valuable to others. Also, Walmart. Walmart is a firm of huge size and global scope. And Yvon Chouinard says if Walmart does 10% of what they intend to do or say they will do in the realm of sustainable business practices, it will be earth-shaking. And so there are companies like Walmart that are out there, and they're definitely learning. And encouragingly, businesses that are learning in the sustainability realm, in my experience, they're very transparent about what they're learning there. So they don't want to hoard knowledge about how to save water or source materials in better ways or have a circular economy in their own firm with supply chains that would be proprietary to them. They want to be open about it. So Patagonia, Walmart, they've been open in that way. In the book, Costco, which is a retailer and has a wholesale warehouse approach, just approach where they assume the role of buying agent for customers, and they capped their margins so that they will never mark any product more than 14%. And they will actually penalize managers if they wind up charging more than a 14% markup. So they'll penalize them through reduction in bonus or reduction in salary. So that sometimes happens in the fresh produce realm of a Costco store, where if the goods are being moved fast and there's not the spoilage, then the markups there might wind up to be higher short term than 14%. So they keep an eye on it and they keep it below 14%. And so what that means, actually, when you look at their financial statements, the membership fee for Costco, which is about $35 US, or if it's an executive membership, it's $65 US. So you have to update your information every year and pay that fee. But the amount of those fees equals the profits each year for Costco. So in a sense, that's what they're working for, is that payment to be the buying agent for the customer. And so when that happens, there's a lot of stakeholders are being addressed there, including employees. And of course, the firm is prospering, but they are, I guess, an example of really how stakeholders can be integrated into the operation of a business enterprise. I also look at exciting upstart companies like Novo Nutrients. They're a firm based in California, and they have a method, process where they will grow bacteria in kind of large vats that would be similar to what beer is brewed in. And with these bacteria, and then the protein there has been rendered into a powder. The bacteria feeds on carbon dioxide. So in this way, they're taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and the planet and transforming it into another way. So and that food protein is used as powder in food stocks for fish. So for, I guess, fish and aqua culture, that's the major cost in growing fish and harvesting them, is the food. So that can be through this process that Novo Nutrients has done. And it's pretty exciting. There's also another company called TerraPass. They were founded 41 MBA students in a class taught at Wharton Business School about 12 years ago, led by Carl Ulrich. It was a innovations class, and so they focused on a way to sell carbon offsets to the public. And so that's what they do, and they have it's organized and systematized. So in a student's dorm room, if you want to offset the carbon dioxide that would be generated during your semester living in that dorm room, you can do that. It's reasonable. It's about, I think, $30 US to do that. Plane flights, you can do that as well. Also for your home, you can give the criteria for there and come up with an offset. Now, what the offset does is that money is directed to renewable energy projects, and particularly renewable energy projects that would benefit disadvantaged people like Native American or indigenous peoples and where they live. So that's the way it works. Interestingly, about 10 years ago, my students would ignore TerraPass, but I think as enthusiasm has grown for sustainable business practices and the breadth of activities has developed, now the students in my classes see that, oh, if businesses are pursuing this, they'll come in a large scale to buy these offsets. And so what TerraPass is doing is potentially very profitable and very rewarding for sustainable business practices. So I've seen my students change from an abstraction they couldn't really understand to now they're see that, okay, when businesses get and pursue this, and they are starting to do it, that it's going to be large scale. And so TerraPass is an exciting sustainable business.
It's a great example of a student project as well that had real impact.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, this is of course a webinar that focuses on teaching. So I'm keen to hear about how you teach sustainable marketing to your students, and what are some teaching methods or materials and forms of assessment that you found to be particularly effective, aside from your book?
Okay. Well, for the book, in 2009 and 2010, I volunteered to teach a course at the University of Wyoming for MBA students, and it was called Marketing, Markets, and Society. And it was really to focus on basically macro marketing and sustainability. I didn't recognize the importance of what was happening at that time, but my department chairman said, "Mark, sounds great. I'll have the entire MBA class take that course." So I was excited. Yes, we went in, taught the course. At the time, I didn't have a book. It was just some cases selected from Harvard business cases. And I was drawing a board and waving my hands. And there was a good number of the students to resist these green marketing ideas and sustainable business practices. And really, they kept coming back to, how could this be profitable for a company? This seems like a dangerous and risky move. It's unproven. You're telling us to go ruin a business for the purpose of saving the natural environment. And so after doing judo moves with my MBA students for 2 semesters, I just stepped back and treated these comments as, okay, they're like a review on a scholarly paper. At some point, you have to step back and say, okay, maybe they're all right. And so when I took that view, I start to see that, well, there is a book that I'm sourcing, and it doesn't seem like there's any one authority or gathered source of knowledge for what I'm proposing here. So that's when I embarked on the book project for SAGE, and it's turned out to be Sustainable Marketing, a Holistic Approach. And each chapter is written for skeptics of sustainable business practice. And so a lot of courses, they're elective courses for sustainable marketing and our sustainable business practices. And so basically those that are already won over come into the course and take it. However, these people at some point need to convince others to go this way. So this idea of persuasion, this is what would be learned in the approach taken by sustainable marketing, a holistic approach. And so, for example, the chapters on the natural environment don't really appear in the book until chapters 8, 9, and 10. And so before that, there are chapters on taking a macro marketing view on the marketing place and a systems view, and then understanding the role of stakeholders, such as primary stakeholders, such as society and local communities, such as partnering companies like upstream suppliers, investors, owners for the company, the customers for the company, and then finally the employees. So those primary stakeholder groups would be addressed. Then there are secondary stakeholder groups such as NGOs and even competitors. So if competitors aren't respected, an entire industry can turn bad. We saw that in the economic crisis of 2008, where the lending or the banking industry together adopted bad lending practices. There's also the government as a secondary stakeholder, the natural environment and future generations, another secondary stakeholder, and finally the media. And so of all those stakeholders, primary and secondary, the one that cannot actually come forward and meet you in your firm at your conference room is the natural environment and future generations, because the animals don't talk and the future generations aren't here yet. So understanding this now allows these more strategic consideration of these natural environment issues and kind of the mechanics of steering a firm to do well in the space of sustainable business practices. Social issues on developing markets and also the poverty alleviation, those close out the book. And with regards to ways that I line up teaching this, I use a simulation from Marketplace Simulations. They're based in Knoxville, Tennessee, and it's called Conscious Capitalism. So it puts students in the role of actually running a startup business selling carbon fiber bicycles. I mentioned that they're graded on and how they address sustainability issues like the natural environment, taking care of employees, investing in ventilation systems so that the fumes for the factory don't, make the employees sick or ill. So that's the way they're graded, and they see it play out here. One thing that I guess that simulation, but also our position here as marketers and people who are considering marketing in the sustainability space is exciting, is because we are actually, I think, the only group that focuses on how to make money. And so when you think of our colleagues in the Environment and Natural Resources Department on campus, their priority is about ecology and ecosystems, and somehow business needs to do less or be regulated. Even when we look around the College of Business, the management department, the teachers there assume that somehow money is made. And so then HR departments, human resource departments are fielded, and leadership is done, and organizational behavior is analyzed or can be. Accounting, again, somehow business money is made and financial statements are created. The realm of finance, somehow money is made and we value the income streams for these firms. So when we come back to marketing, we're the ones that are the only ones that are focused on how money can be made. And so I think there's a creative tension with sustainable marketing. So you can do sustainability and you can do well for yourself. And so that's the kind of the magical tension that if we embrace it, we're going to come up with valuable things for the firms that the students will be working with. And so, but it does bring up an issue here, which I think is an important one, that probably when those early macro marketers were considering the role of marketers in the despoiling of the natural environment, for example, I think they saw that marketers were playing the role of villain in that sense. And so now, is it possible for villains to be redeemed? And Hollywood show that, and also literature, that there are redeemed villains. So Charles Dickens in The Christmas Carol, the character of Ebenezer Scrooge, he starts off as really being a bad guy. He was working in an accounting house and had no human feeling at all, but through the story, he changes and radically changes. And really, I think the final chapter is that no one was more generous or charitable than Ebenezer Scrooge after his 3 dreams that he had that night. Also in recent Hollywood cinema, we've had Despicable Me and 1, 2, and 3, and Gru, the character there, is a redeemed villain. So he was the bad guy, but now he's actually caring for kids and he's a good guy. And then we've also had, even in the Terminator series films, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He came in Terminator 1 as he was coming back in time to kill someone so that person wouldn't have progeny that would affect the future. But then in Terminator 2, he was coming back in time to save someone. So he, in that sense, was a redeemed villain too. So I think literature in Hollywood shows that there is a place for redeemed villains. I think marketers, as sustainable marketers, can be that. And that's an exciting future for us here as we pursue sustainable marketing. I've also, in learning about sustainable businesses, what I've heard from them, and this is at Patagonia and also a brewery, New Belgium brewery in Colorado, but it picked it up along the way. But if it's not fun, it's not sustainable. So sustainability should be about fun. So it's about saving the future, creating regeneration, redemption. So that's what these practices should be about. So I thought about that, and I've integrated into courses I've done by developing a project I call the Rat Video Project. And so what I challenge students to do in this project is to focus on one chapter of the book and then do a rap about it. And so it's about, 1.5 page, double-spaced rap. And their mission is to create a 3 video, and they're rapping about the content of that chapter. And when they do that, because these are societal issues, they sound like they have an enormous social conscience and that they're really sophisticated. They're thinking about things that perhaps others are not realizing yet. So they can choose any of the chapters. They've done well at these. Surprisingly, film production these days can be done just with what's on our phone here, a smartphone. So just capturing the video and the audio on a smartphone. And then most campuses have some video editing software that you can access. They're actually free on the internet. One of I use is called Ice Cream. And so you can get a decent version of that, but there are others, I guess, Microsoft Movie Maker, those kind of things. And you can make your rap video. And so it really puts students into the role of, Web 2.0. So they're generating their own content. But this is the kind of thing that businesses are expecting our graduates to be able to do, to understand these media tools and how to do it. So I've got an example of one. So if I could share the screen, I can just share a little bit about that. Could I do that? Okay.
Sure, please do.
Let me see if I can bring it up here. All right. And this was one done by a student. Her name is Nikki. And let me see if I can get this going here. Okay, can you see Nikki on the screen?
We can, thanks.
Okay, all right. So she's in a Walmart store and she's rapping. Okay, here we go.
Helps us grow. Hop in my caddy in 3 minutes, you won't know. Foods with information products and dollar cheese. A&S flows gonna give you what I please. Knowledge resources flowing like a breeze. Yeah, boy, get that business booty up front. Governments, households, students back in debt. That's a 50 situation. Our nation needs a vet. As a prime rate, honesty is our skyrockets, rocket storms blow in. Let's get your jacket. All about the micro, don't you see? Connected to the elements like the branches of a tree. There's human systems with a purpose and a plea. Our drug of choice.
Okay, so, were you able to hear that?
Yes, we could. Thanks, Mark. It's great to see an example of how it turns out.
Yeah, actually, it took me several years to realize how she did that. She went into the Walmart at 3 in the morning when nobody was there, and she and her team, one of them was in a grocery cart with the camera, and then another one was pulling that grocery cart as she moved down the aisle. Then later they went in and did the sound over what she was rapping. So very clever, very genius, and very much an art form here.
Maybe connected to what you've just been saying, you published a recent article in the Journal of Marketing Education, which is a SAGE journal, about teaching sustainability. So could you just very briefly just give us kind of the thrust of that article and what was included in that?
Yeah, it was basically that macro marketing is a very suitable approach for teaching sustainability, and that I have some experience doing it. Also, that there are regulatory bodies for College of Businesses, and one of them is the ACSB. There's also the CAB in Britain. And, yeah, and then there's one based in France, and so, but all are now moving and focusing on, I guess, societal issues. And so what are the College of Businesses, what are the programs of the College of Businesses, the classes, and the teachers, how does that influence society? So the societal impact I mentioned, my school, the University of Wyoming, went through an ACSB renewal for its accreditation last year. And we were the first in the new, I guess, rules for reaccreditation. And at first I was disappointed because there was not a mandate to, do a particular type of societal impact. So basically the AACSB allows the school to define what they mean by societal impact, although they talk about things that I talked about in the class, I mean, on the call already here, but if, let's say a Royal Holloway wanted to just define its societal impact as in improving employment in Southwest London, that could be their societal impact. But I think what so instead of fumbling this or missing an opportunity, I think what it allows schools to do is to willingly embrace sustainability. So they're being pointed in this direction. And so if they embrace it voluntarily, it will be go deeper into their cultural DNA, and they'll keep doing it over time. One of the mavericks who made it, that's someone who, an entrepreneur or some hero that I feature at the end of each chapter. Her name is Miriam Sadiq, and she actually has she's from Africa, but received a PhD in London, and then worked initially for Unilever. And so she was coming from the epidemiology, public health realm. That was her PhD. But when she went to Unilever, it was transformational because now she was talking about consumers. And so in the public health realm, they didn't talk about consumers, they talked about clients, I think is the way they described it. But anyway, if you have a paying customer, you're in more of a partnership with, and so it implies more of an ongoing relationship. Miriam says that any of the sustainable development goals for the United Nations, there's 17 of them, any of those would be good for a purpose for a firm. So yes, your table stakes or requirement for staying in business is to earn a profit, but you can do that in a way that could address one of the sustainable development goals, such as clean water or reducing hunger, things like that. So if your business fits that, then I think it's well to consider embracing one of these as a purpose for your firm. So that's a pretty exciting thing here too. In teaching courses, there's kind of two views. A colleague at Vienna University, Bodo Schlegel-Milch, he's also published in Journal Marketing Education, and he says in Europe, the students and their parents are asking for instruction and on sustainability and sustainable business practices. And so that's the culture of Europe there, and certainly fueled by or guided by the EU and their proactive stance there with regards to sustainability. When you have a culture like that, I guess it's easier to say, well, we're going to diffuse sustainability teaching across all subject areas. And if people in your faculty are aligned that way, then it could be done. However, it can be patchy or thin, or maybe it just doesn't happen at all in certain disciplines, for example, finance, accounting. So they might be, some of those professors might be slower there. So if there's a course, and it might be called Sustainable Business Practices or Sustainable Marketing, that's a way that there'd be an immersion for a semester on meaningful approaches to sustainable business practices, ways to think about it. And as was done in my book, each of the chapters is undergirded by macro marketing scholarship. So rather than just saying, well, I think this would be a good way to do things, or I've gone back into the macro marketing literature, and yes, over 40 years, we've had thoughtful, well-regarded researchers address these issues in a thorough way. And so I bring that in. So there's a theoretical structure for the content of the chapters. And so when you have that, I think what you have is basically a case for sustainability. And so that would be the benefit for teachers and students, is that over the course of a term, that students and teachers would be able to understand why a sustainable business practices approach makes sense, and why it would give competitive advantage in a marketplace for those firms that really pursue it earnestly and initiate new product development that was focused on sustainable business practices. And that also they need to convince others about the way to go. A question that comes up regularly in recent years is students say, My family owns a business, it might be a construction business, and it looks like I'm going to go into that business. How do I convince my father that this would be the way to go? So it's a great question. Really, I don't think doing it all at once or flipping a switch would be the approach. So it'd be done giving an overview of what's possible, citing examples like Walmart, who are meaningfully doing this, and then a learning process. And we have examples of those in the book. One of them is for usually it's a lumber mill in northwestern Wyoming, Nyman Industries. And Jim Nyman, the owner of the firm, he gave his firm 10 years to embrace sustainable business practices because he wanted it to become woven into the fabric of the culture of the firm. He didn't want to impose it top down. So it is more bottom-up embrace of these ideas. And so, but also I think the book is full of charts showing firms who have pursued sustainable business practice and what their stock price is over the last 10 years versus firms or FTSE 100 indexes or the Dow Industrial Average. And so you can see that, no, you're not going to ruin your business. There are firms that are having enormous success by pursuing sustainable business practices. And so that does matter to convince others to go this way, that there's an economic payoff for being a sustainable firm.
Just to mention, please keep your questions coming in the Q&A tab at the bottom. It's great to see one there already, which we will definitely come on to. Mark, when you mentioned the AACSB and CAS, I was thinking of the United Nations Prime Initiative, Principles for Responsible Management Education, and their focus on the Sustainable Development Goals, which we see coming up a lot. So what's your thoughts around the SDGs, and have you been using those at all in your teaching? And do you think there's, value in using those?
Yes, definite value. And this is exciting. We didn't have those SDGs like 12 years ago. They've just come out recently. They're targeting 2030, but it looks like there have been improvements in some of these areas, and for example, poverty reduction. So that's been very encouraging. And I think the example I cited of Miriam Sadib, who's written a book about sustainable brands, basically choose one of the 17 sustainable development goals, embrace that, make sure it matches, so it doesn't sound like it's an awkward fit for your company, but I think that that's a very meaningful way to go. I guess the sustainable development goals are a very encouraging development. The PRME, that certainly is guidance to business schools of, go this way. There's also the responsible research and management effort that has been initiated. That's been initiated by a management professor. Others in marketing are now joining that. There is a effort, the One Reporting movement. Robert Eccles at Harvard teaches accounting, leading on that. So potentially some really exciting things in that realm of accounting. Also, there's a sustainable accounting standards board that's been developed based in San Francisco. But these issues of how to make judgments about what is sustainable, what's not, that's exciting. Also, I think as on the frontier for us as marketing scholars, we go back to the Brundtland Commission report that was the United Nations report in 1987 that focused on sustainable development, and it really did come up with this triple bottom line or profit approach to business. And it was really sustainable development, starting out for countries, but it's been fitted to the firm level. But that this a Brundtland approach, the triple bottom line approach, how much weight does a firm give to people? How much weight of its effort does it give to the planet? How much does it give to making money. So that remains for us to, understand and what seems to be workable. I think it would probably differ across industries. And for example, the tech industry, even firms like Microsoft and Facebook, Google, they've been embracing the social dimensions and the diversity, equity, inclusion dimensions for their work because they don't have a huge carbon footprint or a kind of an externality that would affect the natural environment. So we see in that industry, they're doing more for, I guess, social issues, whereas I guess a manufacturing industry would be embracing giving more weight to their externalities regarding the natural environment. But I think it remains for scholars to move in here and address some of these complexities and make some sense out of these for scholars as well as practitioners.
Okay, so I think we should start to bring some questions in from the floor now. And actually, the question that is in there relates to a question that I was going to ask, actually. So a general question about, given your years of experience teaching marketing to students, how would you say students and student needs have evolved over time to what they are today? You write about Greta Thunberg in the book, for example. So do you see a little bit of Greta in your students that you teach today, perhaps? And then more specifically, the question that we have is from Alison McGregor. Thank you, Alison, for this question, who says that I've arrived at similar teaching structures for a master's module on marketing ethics and society. But something that Alison does come up against is the issue with students from many different international perspectives of being involved in these activities is a distraction from profit. So that's a point they're making to Alison. They're saying this is all well and good, but we find it difficult to translate into purposeful strategy what will be acceptable to the, quote, old school bosses. So do you have a view on how younger marketers can bridge that perception gap?
Yes. So Alison's posing a good question. This really was the same question that the MBA students that I taught in 2009, 2010 were asking. And so that's why I've written the book to address skeptics of sustainable marketing. So I think her question is about legacy firms. So an established firm that really has not considered sustainable business practices to any great degree yet, how do they move this direction? And what we can see from other firms that have successfully made this transition is that the employees are instrumental in making this transition. So perhaps they're not speaking up now, but if the leaders of the firm engage them and have listening sessions and charge the employees to learn more and share, and then we'll use this as leaders to develop our strategy going in the future. That was done at Interface Carpet Company. They make carpet tiles in Georgia, and it was transformational. And actually the founder of the firm, Ray Anderson, he said after they pursued sustainable business practices for a few years, it saved the company. So they were not efficient enough with regards to water consumption, with regards to energy consumption. And their move toward sustainable business practices came because their customers were asking what was Interface Carpet Tile doing for the natural environment. Salespeople came back to headquarters, asked the marketing people. The question went to the CEO. His initial response was, we comply with regulations. But then the employees staged a forum on, I guess, basically what the firm is doing on research with regards to the natural environment, asked the CEO to speak. He realized he didn't have anything to say. And I think that was, at that time, he read a book, The Ecology of Commerce by Paul Hawken. And that, he said it was like a religious conversion. Reading that book just struck him like a spear in the chest. He realized he was doing wrong things as an industrialist, and people like him would be jailed in the future. So he earnestly and humbly set up on the course of learning about how to do sustainable business practices. So I think there's what has happened initially with legacy firms is what was been termed corporate social responsibility. So it's almost a veneer that's painted on the activities of the company. It winds up to be philanthropy. So they'll give to good causes in local communities or charities. You have some advertising that addresses their newfound social conscience. It's thin and it can lead to greenwashing. So saying that you're doing things in protecting the environment you're not actually doing. So I think it's Allison, its entire process. And so that's what the book addresses, and addresses this idea of the place of a firm in society, how government plays into that. I mean, government is mostly an umpire, regulator in mixed economies of Europe and North America, and even in South America and Asia. So it's going to be a process. It's going to, the leaders of the firm definitely need to be involved, but I think they can look at firms like Walmart, which resisted sustainable moves and now has shifted to embracing them and realizing that they have the largest fleet of trucks in the world, 6,000 trucks, that if they just change the way the drivers drive the vehicles, it can be profound. There's a company in Denver, it was called Green Ride, was set up as a sustainable business to provide, I guess, shuttle service of about 100 kilometers from the airport, and gathering people and bringing them to the airport in Denver. And the founder of the firm told me after a few years of operating the business, it's now called Groom, but anyway, that they had vans with 850,000 miles on the vans, and they had never changed the brake pads because the employees embraced the idea of treating the vehicle in a sustainable manner, treating it gently and driving the vehicle accordingly. So that reduced their traffic accidents, fender benders, and then their maintenance costs. And also the employees felt that they were hour by hour, day by day, doing something that was benefiting the natural environment. So it's pretty exciting when that transformation occurs. And, I guess, Allison, for somebody who's at a firm and wants to see things change and move in the direction, don't do it by yourself. Let people know of your interests, link with others, develop a community, engage the leaders of the firm, and I guess be patient, but see if things can unfold over time. Probably what you want to bring them is news about how money can be made by doing this. And the examples are now abundant for how to do this. And it is exciting.
Okay, we're very nearly at time. We do have one more question, if you have time, Mark,
Yep.
And it's from Anna. And the question is practical. Students are young, they want to use goods that we can produce, but the greater the consumption, the greater the production, and therefore limited sustainable development. So the question is, do you have any advice on how to show students a new marketing practice that will promote sustainable consumption? It's a really big question to end the webinar. So maybe just some quick kind of headline kind of pointers.
Yeah, so this would be something that an individual could do to further sustainable business practices.
I think the question relates to how could Anna, as a lecturer, as an instructor, show students a new marketing practice that will promote sustainable consumption?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, Anna, just something from your own life that you have found that could be very useful. For example, there's green consumption guides that you can now access online, and one of them is based in Britain, and it's featured in the chapter on consumers. And I think it's called Consumer Citizen, but anyway, you can get ratings for products there, and banking services. What's the carbon footprint of these institutions? How committed are these institutions to following sustainable business practices? So then you can share those with others and also with your students. So there are now apps that, give you information like this. And, I think looking to the future, Walmart has undergone an effort to develop what they call the index. So potentially, as you walk down the aisle of a retailing outlet like Walmart, I guess with the proper app on your cell phone, your phone could be telling you how sustainable these products are that you're walking past. And so there are complexities on how to, is it just the carbon footprint? Are there other issues involved? But I think that we're close to having the technology would in real time inform us about decisions that we would be making in stores. So that would be, I guess, just learning about those. So just going to Google and typing in green apps or green consumption apps could be something fun that you could share with others and you'd learn about on your own. And I think that's the way it kind of snowballs, and you challenge others to share some. You could even start a session in your class, like, share an app that you found that would help us in green consumption. And I think that would lead to some really good engagement with the students.
I love that. Yeah, so the students could download the apps and head over to a local store and see what's going on with those products.
Right.
Brilliant. Okay, so just to quickly wrap up, thank you so much, Mark, for today, for joining us. It's been fantastic. There's a link to the book, I think, in the chat, and also to the online resources. To very quickly mention those, there's a set of instructor resources that come with the book. So you slides, a teaching guide, a test bank, and some essay questions as well. So with that, I'll pass back to you, Kim, to just very quickly wrap up. But thank you, Mark. It's been fascinating.
Great.
Yes, thank you so much, Matt and Mark. That was a really interesting discussion about sustainable marketing. I feel like I learned an awful lot. I particularly enjoyed the videos of the wraps that your students had done. So as I mentioned earlier, everyone, the recording of this webinar will be available on the Sage Publishing YouTube channel shortly. And thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.